Uh, Welcome to Art with Carolyn, right? So I'm Carolyn Byers. I'm the Education Director at Madison Audubon. I am also the artist behind Green Sparrow Arts, and today is one of the lucky days where I get to wear both hats at once, and I love when that happens. So tonight, I am kind of doing a little preview event for our new Nature Sketchbook Series. This winter and spring, I'm going to be drawing and sketching with a bunch of you, and we're going to kind of usher in the warm weather with that. So this event tonight was also supposed to be advertising these classes, but they filled up in about 2 days. So everybody, thank you for that support. That's really awesome, and I can't wait to join all of you in these classes. But there's going to be 5 classes, and we're going to have a different topic for each day. We're going to start with plants, because they don't move very much. Then we're going to go on to birds, mixing paint. We're going to cover mixing browns and greens from primary colors. Then we'll do a class on landscape drawings, and then how to pull all of that together into a really beautiful sketchbook page. And so I'm hoping to cover all of those skills tonight, but we do only have an hour, so we'll see how far I get. And I want to let everybody know that oftentimes when we have classes like these, we open it up to our members first, and that's local Madison Audubon members, not just national Audubon members. So if you want to have first dibs on classes like this, become a local member. And that's no pressure to anyone else, because we still have a lot of stuff that's available to anyone at all. But know that if you want to get a jump on classes like this, being a member helps. And you can find out information about becoming a member at our website, madisonaudubon.org. And I'm sure we'll drop a link there in the comments eventually. So as I get started tonight, if you're watching, or even if you're watching another time and it's not live, toss some questions in the comments, or if you have comments, share them there too. Let me know what you're seeing outside right now, what you're drawing, or if you have questions about my drawing techniques or the supplies I'm using. I would love to answer them. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to be creating a sketchbook page from a trip I took to Utah in 2015. And I'm really excited to kind of go back there a little bit tonight. I did a fair amount of camping this year, but I miss going further afield. So this will be really nice. Okay, so I'm going to change my camera around so you're pointing down at my page. If you get motion sick, please don't watch for this part. But I really wanted to do it with just one camera tonight rather than 2, so I think that will be, this will end up being a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to point you down now. Okay. Here we go. Turning it around. I know I have to adjust my lighting. Please bear with me for a second. Okay. Alright, that's a really blue. There we go, that's a little better. Okay, cool. So, let's see. First things first, I want to show you some of my reference photos. So this is a photo book I created from our trip. And here are some of the photos that I'm going to be working from today. We were in high desert sage and the sagebrush. And I know there are way more ideal ways to show you photos than this, sorry, but this is what I've got right now. And I'm going to be painting mostly this kind of scenery, and I'm going to be highlighting these sage grouse. We got to go see them lekking, which was so exciting. I also snagged some photos from the internet because I didn't have a fancy camera at that time, so I have a sage phoebe and a sage thrasher that I want to include. And I have some reference photos for different types of sage. And normally I wouldn't use a reference photo. I guess this is a drawing. That's actually another artist's work. But I just didn't take any pictures of the stage while I was there, and this is the best reference I could find for it. So when I start a project like this, I really like to have good reference photos because I like to draw what I see, and being able to look at a picture is a lot easier for me than trying to remember it, unless it's something that I'm extremely familiar with. And sage thrashers do not fall under that category. So because we only have an hour here, I did, and also because it's live and I want to do something reasonably nice for you all, I did a few sketches before I got started, or before tonight. And these are called thumbnail sketches, where you just do a really, really quick drawing to sort of see where your thoughts take you and try to feel out the piece that you're drawing a little bit. So over here I made a list of all the creatures I wanted to include, or I thought I wanted to include. I have a sage grouse, sage phoebe, sage thrasher, black-tailed jackrabbit, coyote antelope. I have some scat. I hope you can't read this because I really want you all to guess what kind of scat it is as I'm drawing it. And I have two types of sage, mountain big sage and black sage. So these were a few different little sketches I did trying to figure out where things are going to go. And I think I'm going to do this one here. And I know that's a small drawing. You'll see it bigger, I promise. But I wanted to balance the sage grouse and the sage thrasher. And I'm just going to flip this one so it's facing that way. Having things face into your art sort of draws the eye in. If I wanted to send the eye off to the side, I could totally do that and leave this bird there. But for this one, I want them all pointing in. And this phoebe up here, maybe the phoebe down here. We'll see. But then I'm gonna add a little landscape drawing back in here. I think that'll be nice, and I'll sprinkle some other things around. But that's my plan for now. And if anybody has any questions or comments, toss me a note. And I want to make sure I can see them because I'm not certain that I can. That's interesting. Okay, I'll check it again in a second. Drop me a comment if you're there. I want to make sure I can see your comments, please. Okay, so I have my sketches done, and I will admit I also did a little drawing last night. Just some really quick sketches of these birds because, again, I only have an hour here, and I'm kind of a slow drawer. I really like to sink into the drawings and fiddle with them a little bit and make sure I get them right. And I just wanted to be able to knock them out tonight. So I did a little pre-sketching, and the more I draw something, the more familiar I get with it, the quicker I can do it. So I drew these ahead of time, and let's see, I think I'm ready to start drawing. Holy moly. So I have a really big sketchbook here. This is only literally half of the page. It's huge. So I hope I can find space for it all. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to draw some circles to lay out where things are going to be. And these are going to be pretty light lines to begin with, which might be a little challenging for y'all to see on the camera. And while I'm laying this out, I'm thinking about how the breakdown of my sketchbook is going to go. And you know what? I actually think this is going to be a little hard to do with such a big book. So you know what? Is this going to be too small? That might be too small. Let's do it here. No big book. Look at that. We're making adjustments on the fly. Okay. So I'm going to use this little sketchbook now because it'll be way easier to get the whole thing on the screen. Okay. So I am still gonna test my layout because now everything is different because we're not doing a long vertical. Now we have two like this. So what I'm gonna do is start sketching some basic shapes out so that I can see where things are gonna fall. So I've got that sage grouse there, and I really, really like this reference photo. Where did it go? of the Thrasher. That's my favorite. And when I printed this out, first I looked for something under Creative Commons. So the photographer who took this photo said it's okay to use for what I'm doing today. That's really important. Or if I couldn't find a photo like that, I would try to find 3 or 5 or so photos that I could sort of all combine into one photo, take pieces of each one. That way I'm not, infringing on any copyrights, right? So I'm going to add this Thrasher over here in the bottom right-hand corner, and I'm not doing these birds to scale because I don't want to, because that grouse is going to be way too big. And I'm just going to sketch in some of the sage here so I know where it's going to land. Okay, and I think actually, because of the way this is laid out, I'm going to wait on the Phoebe, because these are the 2 birds that I really want in here. And I'm going to just see how this goes. And I'm going to see where I can see the comments. Okay. And there are no comments, which is fine, but that means I don't have to watch them, so that's cool. Okay, so my sage grouse here. Let's pull the reference in. My sage grouse, I'm going to look at its proportions. I'm going to look how long it is and how tall it is. And it is just a little bit, barely at all, taller than it is wide. So I'm going to leave it pretty blocky. It's a nice little square bird in the position that it's in. And its head is fairly small compared to its body. And I'm just sticking with basic shapes still. I'll add detail later. So I'm blocking in where the wings are. I'm blocking in where that dark patch is for the head. And I know I mentioned this already once, but the draw what you see, not what you think you see, is pretty important, because I know that this bird has eyes and a beak, but I can't really see them in this photo. It's just a dark suggestion of that. And so I'm just going to paint what I see, because when you start adding in a lot more details than is, easily viewable from either position you're in or how close you are, that's when drawings start to look overworked and look a little less realistic. So I'm going to be really careful not to add too much in here. And these cool air sacs here are just awesome. Has anybody ever seen them lekking? They inflate those air sacs and they make this crazy noise and do this dance. It's really pretty amazing. I'm just going to block in these feathers very quickly. And these feathers are neat too. When I'm looking at them, I'm thinking about the angle that the feathers are in. And this is a really easy example to think of a clock for. So if you think of, since these are all radiating out from like this point here, these are pointing almost at midnight, these are pointing almost at 1, these are pretty exactly at 2, and so on. So you can really help yourself figure the angles out. And you can do that on any line you draw, but this is a very good example of, it's a way to make it very easy. Oh, I see some comments. Henry, thank you. Not Henry, Henny. Thank you so much for letting me know that I can see comments now. That's great. And Mary asks, what kind of pencils do I use? So ordinarily, I would be using an HB pencil, and HB describes how hard the graphite is. And how hard or soft your graphite is will affect how dark the line is, or how hard you have to push to get a dark line. And ordinarily I would be drawing a lot lighter at this early stage in the drawing, but I want you to be able to see it on the camera. So then as far as brands go, I honestly don't spend too much on pencils just because I'm usually drawing in ink or watercolor over it and I erase the pencil. So this is a Derwent graphic, and it was probably the cheap one at Joann's. This though is a Blackwing pencil, and I actually really like them. It's the only Blackwing I have. It was the first one. I just like, I'm gonna test this out, see how it goes. And I really like it. I'm gonna go get more. This one's getting a little short, and this guy has a little pencil extender on it because it got too short. And the one thing I don't like about the Blackwing is that I can't put my pencil extender on it, but it also will never roll away. So that's a that's a pro too. Okay, so I'm gonna get out my eraser. We're already erasing early in the night. And I'm going to keep going on this. So I have, let's see, I have these two up here, and these probably want to be just a little closer together. And for this, I'm actually going to be I'm going to be pretty precise on it. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going down, and I think I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And these little tick marks, which you might be able to see on camera, are just going to help me place them all so that I don't have to draw them before I know where they're all placed, because that got me into trouble up here. So this one I see is all the way over on this bird's shoulder. There's a big space between those two. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So now I can start adding them in. And this will help me go a little quicker too, since they're already in place. 1, 2. And it's always easy to go darker with the drawing. It's a little hard to lighten. You can obviously do it, but if you're unsure of things, starting light and going darker is the way to go. Unless you're just going to throw caution to the wind and be bold, which is also fun. Alright. And blocking these all in. So the reason we went to Utah was because we had a friend who lived there, and this friend had done his PhD on sage grouse. And so he took us back to his old field sites, and it was a lekking ground, and we had camped in the high desert sage, and it was the best smelling campsite I had ever been at. It wasn't a real campsite, it was just Forest Service land that we camped on. And man, we got there and it just smelled so good. Sage was everywhere. And we woke up at dawn and got out to the lekking site and saw all these males booming. And actually there were not many females there. I think it was maybe early in the season. They weren't so excited about it yet. It was a little cold yet. But we got to see lots of males, and eventually the females did wake up and come out to join us. It was really, really cool. And we could see them we did need binoculars. They were pretty far away. But we had a scope, but we didn't need it. And that was really kind of cool. Okay, so I've got this grouse blocked out, and before I do anything else, since I'm working on a whole piece, a whole sketchbook page here, I want to block in a few other components before I really start to add more detail. So I'm gonna take this out of here, and let's work on this thrasher a bit. Now the proportions for these birds are totally different. If you look at how large the body is for a sage grouse compared to the head, the body is much larger in proportion to the head than this thrasher is. So I'm going to be really careful to remeasure everything again, because it's just a totally different species. And there's a few different ways you can measure proportions, all of which is using one body part to measure against another. If I'm looking at a plant, or if I have a picture like this, it's really easy to take some calipers and measure, that's how big the head is, and the body is about 2 heads tall, right? I can do that with my fingers if I'm being careful. I can do it with a pencil, or really any other stick. And I do have a ruler. I use this mostly just for drawing straight lines though. So I'm going to use the calipers just because they're here and they're out and it's easy. But I'm going to check that this head is just about 2 body lengths. So here's the quick sketch I did. This head is pretty close to right, but I think maybe the angle might be a little off. So this bird is perched, sitting at this kind of angle, and this might seem a little frivolous, but not frivolous, like, I don't know, like I'm being fussy and nitpicky. But a bird's posture really tells you what bird it is. If you think about a hawk versus a crow, a hawk sits very vertically and a crow sits more like a perching bird, and it's pasturing, right? So getting the angle that the bird is perching at is really important to making it look like the bird you're trying to draw. So I'm just going to block in the bird's body. I think I checked the angle. I think it looks alright. I want to pull the chest out a little bit so I can get a nicer angle here. Oh yeah, that's good. And let's check out the tail length. So the tail length is, oh, that's a good measurement actually. So the tail is half of the head plus the body, at least in the proportion that, or the position that it's in here. So I've got the head and half the body right there, and that's how long my tail should be. So I think my tail should actually be a smidge longer than I had initially drawn it. Good thing I checked. And the angle that the bird holds its tail at is also important. If you think of a wren versus almost any other bird, they hold their tail at a really crazy angle. So make sure you get the angle of the tail right too. And that talks, or that doesn't talk about it. A bird's, let's see, mood or what it's feeling might be its behavior will change the position of the tail and the body. So it's important to get all those things right to really convey the message of the bird. And I don't have a fabulous story about a sage thrasher. I think it's just a bird we saw while we were there. It was really cool. I remember getting a really good look at it. But I think we saw it, it wasn't quite on the high desert sage. I know they were there, but we saw that when we were visiting, it was the Great Salt Lake, and there's a refuge there, and there were wild bison. So the sage thrasher got a little upstaged by the bison. And I'm going to back off and not draw that eye right now. I think I want to block in the face a little. Oh, kiddo's coming to say goodnight. Good night, Jay. You want to say hi to everybody?
Hi.
Do you want to wave under here? Here. Okay, good night. I love you.
Good night, sweetheart, for very much.
Oops. Good night. Okay. So this, drawing the face cheek patch in a little bit is going to help me position the eye. And again, depending on the species of bird, the eye will be either higher or lower on the face in relation to where the beak is, or it'll be further forward or backward. And so nailing the eye position really helps you to get the species of bird down pat too. And I think actually I need to check in on the angles here. I'm going to erase all the face, because the top of the head here is a little bit almost horizontal, and I think I have it angled a bit too much. So it's really good just to check in on your drawing as you go to make sure things are where they need to be. And I'm going to draw a line right for where the middle of the beak would be. This bird's beak is open a bit, so that's not where the beak is going to go, but it will help me place the other parts of the beak. And something to keep in mind when you're drawing an open beak, usually if the beak is here, it's the bottom of the beak that moves. The top of the beak doesn't move open very much. So think about that as you're drawing the angles for the top and the bottom of the beak. And I'm going to get my calipers out again because this is a small reference photo, and I want to see how long the beak is in relation to the head. And the head is almost twice as long as the beak. So that's about right. And I want to refine these lines a little bit. Woo! It's 8:30 already, halfway through, and I'm not even done drawing my two birds. That's crazy. You might have to go longer than an hour. I'm going to close the mouth a little. It's open very wide. So, folks watching, have any of you been to Utah? Have you seen the high desert sage? Is there somewhere else that you can't wait to go birding? Either someday when you have the funds, or someday when it's safe to travel again? What do you think? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? I really want to go to the Pacific Northwest. I have not traveled much, and there was a point not too long ago in Wisconsin that was the furthest west I had ever been. Obviously, I've made it further west. I got to Utah. But I want to head west. So, if you want to drop me a message in the comments, tell me where you want to go. I'd love to hear about it. Also, if anyone has any art, maybe not resolutions, but intentions for the year, I'd like to hear about that too. I like to keep a phenology journal most years, and I think I'm going to continue doing that this year. I have a sketchbook that I'm devoting to only drawing birds, because I would really like to get a little quicker at drawing them. This is a little slower. And you know what? I think I need to make this bird a little chunkier. They're a pretty solid bird. Okay. And then we'll be almost done getting this thrasher on. Okay, let's leave the thrasher at that. So, I've got my sage grouse, I've got my sage thrasher. Let's see. I want to know where I'm going to toss this little landscape in. I kind of had thoughts about it hanging out in here. And I really want it to be in color. And I think it'll show up pretty well if I do it there. So the landscape I want to do is this tiny little thing right here. It's just some sky. Just some sky and a mountain range. Let's toss that there, and some sage, some grass. And I actually did a tiny little thumbnail of this mountain range. A thumbnail is just a really small sketch. Where did it go? Oh, it's in this sketchbook. I follow a prompt called Homebound Sketchers on Instagram. They're pretty cool. You should check it out. And one of their prompts was big skies. So I painted this tiny little landscape for it. And all their prompts are about, traveling when you can't, and looking at, state park webcams and, photos that other people have taken, and trying to do some en plein air painting from those. But I want to add this tiny little landscape right in here, because I think the colors will look pretty nice with everything, because they all belong to the same landscape. And I'll leave it there. Maybe I'll drag it over to the edge. We'll see how that goes. That sage grouse is going to make that complicated. Oh, I see people saying they want to go somewhere to see redwoods. Southern Arizona has fabulous birds. Ooh, Mary said she saw a photo of stilts flying at the Great Salt Lake. I would love to see them. Yeah, I want to see stilts too. I've never seen them. Ooh, Honey wants to go to Patagonia and Arizona. That's awesome. Yeah, I want to go to all those places. Sign me up, guys. Okay, so I have my landscape, my sage grouse. I need some plants, I think. So I wanted to draw, let's see, I wanted to draw the two types of sage that were there. And we had mountain big sagebrush and black sagebrush. You hear all my papers shuffling madly. This is way more reference photos than I usually have out all at once. And I think I'm going to draw, I want to draw some leaves up close. And they have a flowering seed head, but you know, when I was there, it was still really cold out, and I didn't get to see that. And so this is actually something that I would use my ruler for. That was a hard word for my brain to grab right now. It's a ruler, everybody. So these leaves here, they look pretty similar, and the main difference is the size. So this leaf is, maximum size is usually about 1 centimeter, and this one is 1.5. So I can use my handy dandy ruler to mark off how big these should be. So I have 1 centimeter there. That is tiny. And I have 1.5 centimeters there. And maybe I'll end up drawing more about those leaves. We'll see. But they both have sort of this three-pronged, they look like dinosaur feet. They look like dinosaurs wearing socks. Because they're not pokey, they're not long. That's what I'm going to call them. If there are any sagebrush scientists out there watching, please don't be offended by my description. Oh, I get a lot quieter when I draw plants than when I draw birds, huh? And I think these ones are pretty wide here. Yep, definitely a lot quieter with plants. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. Tucker, no. No. Ah. Come. I'm so sorry. My neighbors came home. My dog didn't like that. He was sleeping quietly just a minute before. Okay, so we're back. Ooh, Kaylee says art intentions. She's trying to make homemade cards with watercolor paintings for friends and family for special occasions. Landscapes are really hard. Yes, I agree. You know what? It's funny because to me, this is, again, I'm sorry to any landscape artists out there, they don't look as complicated as a bird. I mean, sometimes they are, obviously. There can be tons of detail in them. But they, at least the ones I want to draw, like these, right? They don't seem as complicated as a bird, but they're so hard for me. There's so much more brain effort that goes into me thinking about a landscape than anything else I've drawn. And I mean, it's just because it's new to me, and it's something that I haven't done yet, and that's fine. But it's just really silly. So, Kaylee, I hear ya. Let's get better at landscapes together. They're quicker. Okay, so this one, the black sagebrush was smaller. You know what? I want to write sagebrush just across the top. I'm going to do it. These pens. I've been getting into fountain pens lately, so I want to be a little more sustainable. And I don't like having to buy plastic pens all the time that I just throw out when they run out. And so I've been trying these out, and I kind of like them. Still getting the hang of them though. Clearly. Maybe I need to warm it up a little before I start trying to write with it. So we have sagebrush, and we have, what was it? Mountain Big Sagebrush. And black. Okay, and I realize that handwriting is real small for any of you watching at home. Okay, so I will come back and possibly add in some more plants in a little bit as I find out how much more time I have. And I still have that scat that I need to get in there, huh? But I want to add in, I'm going to do this landscape first because those washes are going to be a lot easier to do before I get that sage grouse in. And as I was thinking about this landscape, I tried to remember the rule of thirds. So if you break your landscape up into thirds rather than dividing it directly in half, it'll look more visually appealing. And now that I've reminded myself about that, I'm actually going to move this bottom line up a bit because I think I want more sky and less ground. So I'm going to put this right here. Lovely. That'll be a little better. Okay, so we're gonna start with some paints. You ready? I'm ready. So I've got my watercolor paints. I keep in this palette, and I like them dried on here rather than squeezing them from a tube because it's not as messy. It's easier to clean up. I feel like if I was squeezing it from a tube, I might waste more. Right now, I'm just taking exactly what I need for each project out, and everything else is dried here. And quick cleanup is important for me because I have toddlers and pets that run around. And I also like it because if I do go into the field and I'm painting there, it's really easy to transport and to work from. I use a few different types of watercolors, mostly Daniel Smith and Winsor Newton. And I love mixing colors, and I also love having a cheat sheet right in front of me. So this is a mixing chart that I made myself, and in our mixing class I'm going to talk more about this, but it's basically a matrix, so I can see anytime I have one color mixed with another color, I can see exactly what it turns into, and I can also therefore say that's the closest color to what I want, how do I get there quickly, and then how do I need to tweak it to get the exact color I need. So I'm totally an impatient artist, and so taking the time up front to create something like this helps me work a lot faster if I'm outside and it's cold out, or it's wet out or whatever. Or if I just only have a certain amount of time to devote to painting, right? It's after my kid goes to bed for an hour. So it's really nice to be able to have that cheat sheet. Okay, so I want to mix, let's see, I already said we're copying this painting here. So I want to mix up some sky right now. I'm going to do the sky first, and then I'm going to do the foreground, and then I'm going to add this part in here after these two dry. So with watercolors especially, it's really important to let your layers dry, at least layers that are near each other touching, because anytime you add more water, the paint is going to want to travel into the wetter area, and so it'll move on you. So I have two shades of blue here, phthalo blue and ultramarine. And ultramarine was the one I used to get this. And so that was just a watered down ultramarine. And I really like the sky I achieved there. We'll see if I can copy it. Probably not though. So let's see, ultramarine, I have the way this is organized corresponds with this. So I know this blue here is that one there. So I'm going to snag a little of that. I'm going to toss it over here. I'm going to add a little water so it's not so bold. And I actually have, this is my favorite thing I've learned recently. It's an old sock. It's only the part that goes on your ankle, not the foot part. But you can use this as like a reusable paper towel. And it's so nice because it cuts down on waste. And also if you're outside painting, you can stick it on here and you have one less thing to hold if you're outside in nature. And it can't blow away if it's on your wrist. I love it. So now that you've heard my TED Talk about old socks and repurposing them, I can go paint again. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna mix that up. We'll see how far it takes me. And I want to create a really cool fluid wash, which feels silly to say because it's water. But I'm gonna flood the whole area here with water. And watercolor is really cool because it'll travel where you put the water. And so if I'm really, really careful and don't put any water on these feathers, the paint won't go there, theoretically, if I'm careful. I'm also a little lucky. So you can't see what I'm doing here because I'm just painting it with water. Oh, Kaylee says she's got a whole bag of old socks. Awesome. That's super cool. So I'm going to toss some brighter blue down in some areas. I really want to get that like soft cloud look. And so I'm going to try and leave some areas whiter. I also want to make sure I do get a little color in between these feathers, otherwise it's just going to look a little weird. And the feathers are pretty dark, so it's okay if I go over them. And I want just a little darker blue in some places. So I'm not going to put it directly on here because that's too bright for what I want. But I am going to mix it over here with some water. You can't see that. With some water. And then I'm going to go back and drop it in some places. And I'm not going to fuss with it too much because watercolor tends to move around as it dries and the edges kind of soften a bit. So I want to see what that looks like before I mess with it too much. And I say that as I continue to mess with it. This is my problem. I can't just leave it. I have to keep fussing. So now there's a video record of me saying I'm going to leave it. So now I'm going to leave it. Okay, so I have that really bright blue there. I should have checked the other colors I used before, right? I suppose I could look at my reference photo instead of the painting I did. So here's my little reference photo down here. It's a little hard for y'all to see because there's a glare on it. But I have some really light sunlight just hitting the ground there, and I think I used this really nice raw umber color. Oh, that's another thing to check out. So paints are made with pigments or mixtures of pigments, and the names of the paints might not be the same across brands. So for example, this is raw umber and this is raw umber, but this is Daniel Smith and this is Winsor Newton. And when I bought this, that's the color I wanted, but that's the color I got. So it's a really good idea to take a look at there's a number associated with each of the pigments. And if you look at that number, it'll tell you a little bit more about what you're going to be getting in the paint. So just be aware of that if you're heading out to buy paint. Also be aware of whether you still have glue in your brush before you start painting again, because I do have paper towels here because I'm at home. Sometimes it's nice. So I just laid down some water there, and it still had a little bit of blue left in it. And ordinarily I wouldn't care about that, but the paint that I'm adding is going to be a really yellowish brown, and I really don't want to make green without knowing what kind of green it's going to be. So I got rid of that blue, And let's see, how about I test my brush over here? Now it's clean. So I'm going to add a little water down so that I can add this really nice raw umber. And this one, I suppose I should test it over here before just adding it right in. Sometimes I go right from the palette over it, and sometimes I make sure I water it down first. But the blue especially is a really intense blue, so I wanted to make sure that was watered down. This color is less dramatic, so I can start adding it in. And these, I might just end up painting over. Let's check our reference photo again about the sagebrush or the sage grouse. Ooh, those are some pretty dark feathers, so I'm just going to give it a wash over, because I would like the background to be very smooth. Okay. Now I need this like bluish green, which again is hard for you all to see in the reference photo. And I think actually I might let that dry for a minute. And maybe I'll move over to the sagebrush. Ooh, it's 8:46. I might have to start adding in the scat. That's what we're going to do. In the last 15 minutes, I'm going to draw some scat. I'm going to add some color to a sage grouse. And we'll see what happens. So I'm going to draw 2 pieces of scat here. And if anyone in the comments wants to guess about what creature dropped these, you feel free. And if you have any questions, like you want a hint, I would give that to you. And these are 2 different pieces from the same creature. And let's see, I need a light yellowish green. So I'm going to take a little of my sap green. Greens are really tricky because if you buy a tube of green in the store, it's often a lot brighter than you really want for a nature painting. And so I mix every green that I use. And sometimes I mix it from blues and yellows, and sometimes I mix it starting with the green. So that time I started with a sap green and then started adding some things to it. But I just find that works a lot better for me. And this needs to be a really pale, watered down. Oh yeah, that's pretty solid. Maybe a little more brown. It's pretty solid and I'm painting poop. Fabulous. What do y'all think of that? Okay. And some brown down here. And then once that dries, I'll go back in and add a shadow. And this has a little bit of that other type of poop there. So both of these were created by the same creature. And then this needs to be some really intense black. And I do have black here. I think I'm going to want to add some blue to this though. Maybe some Payne's gray. And this is just ivory black. And of course, if I wanted to mix something similar to this, I could add all of the colors together. But I don't have the patience for mixing blacks. Or browns. I hate mixing browns. I much prefer to use out of the tube for brown. I mean, I still adjust them and mix them a bit, but I don't start from primaries if I'm mixing browns. Okay. Ooh, someone's guessing prairie dog. Someone else says fox and skunk. No. Not. I'm sorry to report that's not even close. Both of these scats were produced by a bird. And a pretty big bird. And this one it was like oily almost, and very shiny, and it had dried hard, but it looked like, gosh, it looked like it splattered when it hit the ground. And this one looked more like a goose poop, and like the consistency of a goose poop. Yeah, and this is Shadow Violet, which is really lovely, this pink color here, for giving shadows to yellowish things. It's really easy to overpower a yellowish item with a shadow. And Shadow Violet's a kind of a nice, like, purpley gray. And it works really well for adding shadow to yellow things. Okay. So since I'm going to let those dry for a minute before I add detail, and maybe I'll just add detail with pen later. But in case anybody hasn't guessed yet, these are sage-grouse poops. And I actually have a picture of both of them right next to each other, like this, where a bird left both of them, both options. Okay, so my landscape is a little dry. I actually really like the way the sky turned out. I'm going to flip back and check out what I did here. Looks like I mixed sort of an ambiguous greenish, bluish color and then added some brown splashes in. So that's what I'm going to do. We need a greenish blue. And I think I'm going to use my smaller brush. Oh, my brushes. I can talk about those. These brushes are pretty cool. I like them a lot. They're really good travel brushes, and honestly, I have a box of brushes in my closet that are supposed to be my home brushes, but I never use them because I just like these ones so much. And you can buy these in synthetic or in sable. I have them in both. The smaller ones are sable. Those are more expensive. The larger ones are synthetic, and I like them both the same. I also really enjoy using these water brushes. Again, it's more plastic, which I don't love, but they last a really long time, and these synthetic bristles are, you can be rough with them, which I like, because I don't always love the stress of taking care of nice brushes. So these ones are really fun, and these also have a water well, so you can fill this part with water, and it's really nice if you're painting outside. Oh, I just learned another tip. If you're painting in the cold, paint with vodka, and it won't freeze in your paintbrush, it won't freeze on your palette, and it won't freeze on your paper. So cool. It doesn't freeze. So I need to go do some winter painting outside so I can use vodka for my paints, not for drinking. Anyways, it's really nice because then that's one less thing to hold. And if you want water on your brush, you just squeeze a little, water comes out, and you can do the same thing on your paint palette. So you can drip a little water in, and then once it falls in, you can pick up the paint you need. And the same if you want to clean it, you just squeeze more water out and rub it on your sock. So both of these brushes are really nice to use, and these are Pentel. Oh, I forget the exact make of them. But the brand is Pentel. Okay, so I was mixing paint a second ago, or getting ready to anyways. And I think maybe this was the green that I actually used for that paint. You can't see what I'm doing. Oh yeah, that'll work. Just a nice, soft green. And this one, I don't want to get on the bird, on those tail feathers, because it'll be harder to cover up than that yellow will be. And now I'm just going to drop in a suggestion of shrubby bushes, because I don't want to paint all the detail there. This is just a tiny little landscape, which are exactly the kind I like, so I can avoid all the detail. But I don't want to paint the detail because your eye wouldn't see it at this level. It would just sort of fade. All the details would fade. But I do want to make sure my washes are pretty consistent and pretty smooth. Okay, sweet. So now that I have painted some poop in a really nice landscape, it's 8:55, and maybe I should add some color to my sage grouse, huh? Although I need to make sure that I don't paint anything that's touching this paint because all the paint will bleed into that landscape. So that'll be important to remember. I'm gonna take a sip of tea. Pro tip, everybody, don't put your teacup near your water dish because you'll mix the two up. I have absolutely done that. Alright, so I need to be able to show you my reference photo. So I need to rearrange everything on my table. So here's my reference photo of my sage grouse. And I'm going to start, let's start with his cool air sacs. So let's see, it is kind of weird. It's like a greenish yellow up here, and then it has a really nice warm tone to it in the middle. So I will, maybe I'll go with a little watered down Windsor lemon for that greenish tone. So Windsor lemon is a cool lemon. It's a cool lemon. So paint colors. You have warm colors and cool colors, right? And let me see if I have it better. Ooh, I've got my color wheel. Sweet. Okay, so generally speaking, these colors are warm, these colors are cool, right? Blue's pretty cold. But you can also have a coolish red or a warmish red, right? Or a coolish yellow and a warmish yellow. And so when you're mixing your paint colors and when you're, just painting in general, it's really important to look at whether you are tending towards warm or cool with a paint color, and whether that's what you want, right? So if for example, I think a goldfinch is a bit more of a cooler yellow, and a yellow warbler is more of a warm yellow. And so getting those details right is really important, just when you're trying to make a bird look like the bird, right? So what was I doing? I was taking some Windsor lemon, watering it down so that I got a nice, light, cool yellow wash for up here. And this is kind of a bold color, so I want to go pretty gently with it. And now I need a warmer yellow to go in here. And I think I'm going to start with this transparent yellow. I love transparent yellow. I think it's my favorite yellow to use. I'm going to start dropping it in there. And that is a little bright. So I'm actually going to take a paper towel, or if you had a cleaner sock, you could use it. I'm going to blot it a little bit to remove some of that because that was too much, too bold. And I want to mix up a little orange. So I'm going to take just a bit of red and I'm going to put it into that transparent yellow. Yeah, and that's pretty nice. So I dropped it in there and it's starting to fade like this because I had quite a bit of water down. I'm just going to help this one fade a little bit. Blend a little bit. Okay. That's good. And it looks really weird because there's no other color on the bird at all. So let's change that. So I'm going to go back to that I'm going to mix some raw umber and some burnt umber. So it'll give us a little redder, warmer brown. I think that's pretty close to what I want. And you know, if you are curious or you don't want to toss it on there, you can always test it over on the side to make sure it's what you want. And I think that really, it brings something to the painting because it's showing your thought process. And it's not just the final product. I really like doing mixing tests on the side. And so I'm adding this warm brown to the feathers here and the wings. And I'm probably going to paint over a lot of this because that bird is much darker there. But it'll give it a nice warm glow underneath it. And it'll be more interesting than if I had just painted it a dark brown. So a nice little underlayer is pretty good. Okay. Now I want some darker colors over it. And this is a really dark brown bird. So I'm going to start with some raw umber. This is one of the drawbacks of creating a palette like this. So you can also buy palettes with paint in them. And I like this method because I can pick and choose what colors I put in here. But sometimes the paints don't dry perfectly. And Daniel Smith is not quite as good as Winsor Newton for drying in a palette like this. So if you're going to build one like this, know that that's a possibility. Alright, so I've got, you can't see where I'm going on the palette, can you? I'm sorry. This is raw umber. I tossed some right there, and I want to darken that up, and I'm going to use, let's see, I want to use ivory black, because it's a very neutral black. I have some blacks that are bluer, and that's not what I want here. So I'm going to start brushing that in here. And it gets a little mottled over on this edge, so I'm not going to cover all the whites of the paper, that is. And I want some more water on my brush, some more paint on my brush. And here I am painting all of the primaries. Those are the big flight feathers. Because you can see all of the individual feathers like this. But up here, I'm of course just painting a block of color. I'm not really painting individual feathers. Look at this. My blue got too close to my brown, so now I have blue in my brown. I don't want that. So I'm going to mix some more. So we've got the umber and more ivory black. Okay, and I'm going to start here. And here I'm going to go a little more carefully because I do want individual feathers. I'm just going to go with some straight black right here because it's significantly darker. And there's a little shadow down here. I struggle a lot with getting contrast in my pieces. It makes me uncomfortable. So I really have to push myself to add darks in. And even now, this isn't very high contrast, but I'm definitely aware of the fact that I need to constantly make myself go darker. Okay, so I want to add some of that brown up here in the head. I actually think I drew his head too big. Seems borderline too late to adjust that now, though. Okay, and I want to add a little brown in here. Give it a little shading and a little gray, maybe some neutral tint. See some people signing off. I'm glad you were here. I'm glad you joined us. I might sign off soon too. We'll see how far I go. And I want to make sure I keep some white there. It'll be hard to go back in later. Okay, so now this sage grouse also has some striping on its feathers, and I am going to use my artistic license to completely ignore that because that would take a lot of time to do. And maybe actually after it dries, I'll go back in with some white gel pen and draw some stripes in. And I realize now I was showing you my palette, but not actually what I was mixing. I was just doing some more of that dark brown color. So some raw umber and some, ivory black. So I'm just going to toss these in now. And I did make sure that this landscape behind here is dry now, so I can paint in here. Add these feathers in. I'm going to bring these all the way down to the head. Whoops, but the head's not dry. Excellent. Toss these in. You see how it's getting lighter and lighter as my brush has less and less paint in it? Tucker's back. Junior handshake. Oh, I kind of like this. It's looking good. Neat. All right, and I think, let's see. Oh, I don't want it to get too thick. I do want it to be a little darker though. These little spikes. Ooh, so someone asked what kind of paper is in my sketchbook. Is it watercolor paper? Yes, I should have mentioned that long ago. Thank you. So this is a sketchbook. I actually made it myself. And leave me a message in the comments if y'all want a class about bookbinding, because we could make some sketchbooks together. But this is 150-pound watercolor paper, and the poundage is just how thick it is. So it's really hard to find sketchbooks with paper this thick, which is why I made my own. But you can usually find at least 90-pound paper pretty easily. And it is pretty important if you want to practice watercolors and will eventually paint on thicker watercolor paper. It's pretty important to practice on that paper too. So I wanted a sketchbook with thick, nice watercolor paper in it. I have used watercolors in sketchbooks with just sketchbook paper, and it's not the same for sure. The paper can only take 1 or 2 layers of paint before it just becomes completely saturated and very hard to work with. But that was also really interesting for me too, because it really forced me to really think about what color I wanted to put down and what color I needed it to be. So I got a lot better at mixing watercolors that way. So that's not to say you can't paint with watercolors on regular sketchbook paper, but it'll be a really different experience. So think about what you want to get out of your painting and your practice as you're choosing your paper. Okay, so I'm going to add in this mountain now, and it's like a bluish brown. But I used in this painting a really warm brown, and I kind of liked it. Like, present tense, I still like it. So I'm going to use that warm brown back there, and we'll see how it turns out. And I think I just used this raw umber. Oh, but I wanted to let it with water first. So this is just dirty water I'm using. And now I'm going to toss the paint in. And I think I want it a little darker, a little moodier. So I'm going to basically use the exact same color that I was using for that sage grouse. Mixing black in with my brown. Oh yeah, that's a little better. And here I'm being a little careful not to paint over the feathers. I could always go over the feathers again. Okay, and I want to add just a light, a little too dark there. The good news is I can go in with some water. But just a little something there to cause some interest, right? Okay, so I think I'm going to call that landscape part. Good. All right, so it is 9:11. We are totally over. But you know, part of having a sketchbook like this is keeping notes in it and writing some lovely things down. So I'm gonna grab a micron pen, even though I said I was trying to get away from them, just because I know the ink's gonna behave. And this is live, guys, right? So I want to write some stuff, some notes. So I'm gonna write sage grouse. On the lek, because the lek is the sage grouse don't hold territories like most birds do. Their territories don't include resources. It's just a dancing ground for the males to display. So it's on the lek at dawn, and there was golden sunshine lighting up the sage. And here I'm going to write 2 varieties of sage grouse scat. And this was from our Big Sky road trip in Utah. It was in 2015. Oh, and I should put today's date on here, right? Today is the 12th. I'll just toss it down here. Cool. Oh, the date is 1/12/21. Cool. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it here. I'm definitely going to add some more detail to it. I'll add some more notes. I'll finish my sage thrasher. I'll maybe add that Phoebe in. And if you want to see where this goes, you can, I'll definitely post the final photos on Instagram. And you can find me there. Let me see. I'll write it big on a piece of paper here. Move this out of the way. And if you want to follow along or ask questions, it's at Green Sparrow Arts. I should have made that bigger, huh? Yeah. So, let's see. Let me get my face back in here. Don't watch if you're gonna get... Oh, it's very, very dark now. Okay, there we go. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for painting with me, hanging out with me tonight. I had a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to our Nature Sketchbook Series. That's hard to say. So go outside and draw, or take pictures and draw, or go find yourself a webcam and draw. Madison Audubon now has a webcam out at Goose Pond, so you can draw Goose Pond from the comfort of your living room if you wanted to. So this program tonight was free, and if you feel like you learned something or benefited from it, feel free to donate so we can keep more programming like this free. But also know that it will continue to be free because we think nature should be for everyone. And I know I just said it was all free, but you know, the classes we have, you did have to sign up for. And if you would like first crack at signing up for classes like that in the future, become a Madison Audubon member. So our classes we offer, usually we offer them first to our members. And remember, being a Madison Audubon member is something different than national. We're your local chapter. So check that out. We'll drop a link in the bottom. Good night, everybody. Have fun drawing. Thanks for joining me. Bye. There we go. Got it.